Okay, good afternoon, everyone. We have a few people in the room here and a few more online. I'd like to welcome everybody this afternoon to Research Data Management Planning and Introduction. My name is Sarah Stevenson, and I'm the Physical Sciences Librarian at Dalhousie, and I also have responsibility for research data management and some other areas of scholarly communication. And sharing the presentation with me today is Erin McPherson from the McRae Library on the Truro campus, and she's a reference and instruction librarian, and she also has responsibility for research data management, primarily on the agricultural campus. So what we're going to cover this afternoon, we've got about 20 minutes worth of presentation slides, and then we're going to open up the floor for questions. So what we're going to cover this afternoon, why manage data, the tri-agency guidelines that came out earlier this summer, creating a data management plan, and introducing DMP Assistant, which is a data management planning program from Portage. And I'll also tell you a bit about what Portage is. There'll be a very brief word about data repositories. There'll be more about that in coming sessions. A few resources for DAO researchers and what we're planning over the next year or so. So I'm going to turn things over to Erin for a few slides.
Hi. So we're going to talk a little bit about why we'd want to manage digital research data. And we've got 5 key points up there. There's many reasons. Oh, I'll move over. There's many reasons why you'd want to. Some of the more obvious ones are probably 2, 3, and 4 that we might be familiar with. So number 2 is safekeeping, so protecting from theft and loss, natural disaster. I know personally some of us have been through this. So safekeeping is definitely an important aspect of digital research data management. Number 3, preparing for change. So technological change, administrative and personnel change. Coming through another institution into Dalhousie, we can see examples of that there. So it's important to be ready. To be organized, making and accessing and using data easier. Number 1, I kind of left that to the end, or to near the end, but it's sharing data and also reusing it. This is maybe something newer, but it allows people to benefit from your data. There's been, potential to increase your citation rate by sharing it. And one of the other features is it may help to reduce duplication. And the 5th one, a little out of order, is the Tri-Council Funding Agency Guidelines. We're going to talk a little bit more about those next. So the tri-agencies, NSERC, SSHRC, and CIHR recently came out with a draft statement of principles on digital data management, and that was this summer. That statement covers a couple of areas. So management and expectations of digital research data management, and also the responsibilities of researchers, the research communities, institutions, and funders in meeting these expectations. So as you're aware, they're publicly funded organizations, and they're already advocating for open access to research results, but this is also going to include research data. And the reasons that they give are similar to the ones I stated in the previous slide. To avoid duplication, advance knowledge, and in turn maximize research benefits to Canadians and promote Canadian researchers and their accomplishments, which is really important. I've got some examples of research data up here on this slide. This is just, things that are considered research data would be scanned documents, digital media, database contents, digital models, records of standard operating procedures, and so on. So there's lots of examples of research data out there. This is some examples of different types of formats. So in the slide, if you can't see, there's floppy disks, cassette tapes, digital recorders, USB drives. So there's a lot of issues even surrounding these. They can be easily lost, technology changes so quickly, and access to this data. So I'll go back to Sarah, and she'll talk a little bit about data management plans.
Okay, so we've seen all kinds of devices and different types of data And so why do you need a plan? Well, really, your plan should be an ongoing evaluative task throughout the course of your research. So you make a plan as you're going through things, you adjust the plan based on what you're finding. And your plan contains important information about your data and issues in data management. So you're a researcher at the agriculture campus doing blueberry research. They've got a whole raft of students out in the field, and they've given them spreadsheets of what they should be looking for when they're counting blueberries or whatever, making sure that everybody fills things out the same way. So when the researcher is looking at the data at the end of the month after the students come back from their field work, it actually makes sense. So those kinds of things that get included. So the elements of a data management plan, and there's several elements, and with each element I'm going to go through the kinds of questions that we ask about each of these. So data collection, what types of data you collect, create, link to, acquire, or record. What file formats will your data be in? Will these formats allow for data reuse, sharing, long-term access of the data, so file format matters? What conventions and procedures will you use to structure, name, and version control your files to help you and others better understand how your data are organized? Another element is documentation and metadata. So what documentation will be needed for your data to be read and interpreted correctly in the future? I had a series of interviews that I did for a research project several years ago in a version of NVivo that is now obsolete. And because I didn't update every version, I went from version 8 to version 10, my version 10 doesn't read my version 8 files. So if I'm to go back to that, I need to retranscribe all of those interviews and recode them. If I'd had a good data management plan, I would have saved them outside of the proprietary format and been able to import them into the later version. How you make sure that your documentation is created or captured consistently throughout your project. So that's our students back in the field, making sure that everybody records things in the same way. What metadata standard or tools to document and describe your data will you be using? So for somebody else to use it, how are you going to explain what your data collection, what your spreadsheet is actually recording? So storage and backup. What are the anticipated storage requirements for your project in terms of space and the length of time that you're storing it? How and where will your data be stored and backed up during your research project? How will the research team and other collaborators access, modify, and contribute to the data throughout the project? Preservation, where will you deposit your data for long-term preservation and access at the end of your project? Indicate how you will ensure your data is preservation ready. So you need to consider preservation-friendly file formats, data integrity, anonymization if necessary, de-identification and inclusion of that supporting documentation. Sharing and reuse, what data will you be sharing and in what form? Do you have ethical obligations to not share everything? Have you considered what type of end-user license you need to include? What steps will be taken to help the research community know that your data exists? In the responsibilities and resources section, identify who's going to be responsible for managing your project data, both during and after, and the major data management tasks for which they will be responsible. How will responsibilities for managing data activities be handled if substantive changes happen in the personnel overseeing the project data, including a change of principal investigator? So if your lab manager decides to leave, how are you going to handle that transfer of responsibilities? What resources will you require to implement your data management plan? And what do you estimate the overall cost for data management to be? And the last section, ethics and legal compliance. If your research project includes sensitive data, how will you ensure that it is securely managed and accessible only to approved members of the project? And if applicable, what strategies will you undertake to access secondary issues of sensitive data? And how will you manage the legal, ethical, and intellectual property issues? So for those of you who have been counting, that's 20 questions. Okay, so there's a lot to consider, and it can be overwhelming. And this is where we move into portage. they've developed a tool to help you do all of this and to take you through those 20 questions that I just read. So introducing the Portage Network. Portage was launched this week. The website went live on Tuesday, and it's a collaboration by the Canadian Association of Research Libraries, of which Dalhousie is a member. And they're putting together a number of resources. And the first one that they've released is DMP Assistant, and it has a French equivalent, and thank you to Université de Montréal for doing all of the translation work. DMP Assistant is actually hosted at the University of Alberta. And this is the first of several initiatives that are coming. DMP Assistant was developed, it was adapted from the United Kingdom's Digital Curation Center DMP online tool. And Portage has had a group of experts in data management, mostly librarians from across the country, that have been working on adjusting the tool for Canadian use. And there's ongoing other resources that will be available later on that they've been working with. And it's a really great group of people. There's a few of them that I know, and they are really on top of their game, and they're going to make it easier for the rest of us. The tool is freely available to all researchers in the country. So if you have a collaborator that's a member of a university that is not a Carle institution, that's okay. They can sign up and get an account as well. So what does it look like? When you go to that Portage website, this is what you see. There is a sign in and a sign up. So I have a login already, so all I had to do was sign in. If you don't have a login, you fill in the sign up part. It asks a bunch of things about where you're from and your institution email address. You're supposed to get a message back confirming your account, and then you're good to go. One of the things in the paragraph that you can't see underneath the sign up in that screenshot is that they are working towards a single sign-on. So those of you that have used Canary or Eduroam, which is on the Canary backbone, you should be able eventually to use your Dalhousie login credentials to log into this. Right now, it's a separate login, so keep that password in your magic password list of things. If you're like me, you have a secret drawer in your desk where you hide everything for the multiple databases that you have access to. So there's a number of options. When you log in, you get a list of your plans. You can create a plan. There's information about, there's some help information. There are a few organizations already into the drop-down. Dalhousie isn't there yet, but we will be. But the Portage, the last one on the list, the Portage is the generic research data management planning tool, and that has everything that I just read out to you. And it's a catch-all. It covers everything and more. So when you get into creating a plan, this is what it looks like. In the very first section, the data collection, there's your question. What types of data will you collect, create, link to, acquire, or record? There's a little blurb in the blue box about what data collection really is, just to remind you of all the different kinds of ways you may be collecting data. And then there's the Portage guidance on the side. So it gives you some examples if you don't understand the question. The add comment section is because this is a new tool. It has been beta tested. I was at a conference in May where we beta tested some things and made some suggestions. They are asking for feedback. And then you can just type in what your answer into the box and click save. My slides got a little bit out of order here. So this is what you see when you've got plans, and I've got 3 plans in there under different templates. If you have used DMP Builder, the old University of Alberta version that was migrated into Portage, and there's some things that seem to be missing. I think that I had some data actually entered in the habitat selection by grasslands that didn't come through, but that was a test, so I wasn't too worried about losing that. You have various options. You can go into a plan that you started and edit it and carry on. You can share it, so Erin and I are working together on something. I could be creating the data management planning tool, and I can share it with her, and export, so that export gives you the export either to Word or PDF. I can't remember, all the file formats are there, and you can attach that to your grant application. So this is another screenshot of where you get what things look like when you get further down into the tool. So the data collection was where we saw the first question, and now we're down to preservation, and the guidance is there, and you've got my answer, and I click saved, and then I took the screenshot, so the green bar says, answered less than a minute ago by Sarah Stevenson. So if you're sharing things, it would show up which one of you is contributing on a shared plan. So one of the things that came up there is preservation, is where are you going to put your data for long-term storage? And I'm just going to touch on this briefly today. We do have some data repositories where you can put things for long-term storage. At Dalhousie, we have the institutional repository, DalSpace, which is an archiving option for completed data. We are testing an instance of Dataverse for live data. Testing of that should be complete fairly soon. And if you want to see what a Dataverse installation looks like in another consortium, there's Abacus, which is a group of universities in British Columbia, UBC, UVic, Simon Fraser, and the University of Northern British Columbia. And they've got quite a robust installation of Dataverse there. And in fact, the person that is managing that is part of one of these DMP expert groups for Portage. And Scholars Portal, which is the Ontario Council of University Libraries. So that's all of the university libraries in Ontario. Not all of them are on board yet, but a number of them are. There's some great examples there from Queen's and from Guelph. So you can have a look at that. And what you're seeing is the public-facing data. So those are the data sets that you can go in and grab and reuse and make a use of yourself. The researcher on each project, there may be some hidden files and behind that are only for the research team. And the last item on the slide is a registry of research data repositories. So that's a worldwide registry of data repositories across the world. Some of them are free, some of them are not. So do be mindful of that. If you haven't built this into your funding application or you don't have money for your storage, some of them will charge. Most of our access will be free. We're still negotiating about some of the high volume people that are looking for terabytes and terabytes of storage from us. That's part of what we're working out. And lastly, some resources for you. So data management at Dalhousie University Libraries. On the Dalhousie Libraries website, if you go under services, there is an option on the right-hand sidebar near the bottom of the sidebar that takes you to our data management page. We do have an email address, data.management@dal.ca, and that goes to several people, including me. We will be launching a subject guide within the next month. It's almost ready to go. It just needs the last little bit of tweaking. And we are planning to do a series of DMP assistant workshops on your campuses. It's what Erin and I are calling the traveling roadshow. Yeah. So when we go to each campus, so when Erin does this at the agriculture campus, she will have a case study that's based in agriculture to work through. So you will be seeing something that hopefully relates to what you're working with. And we've collected these case studies from several places, including our friends at the University of British Columbia that have been very kind in putting Creative Commons licenses on everything and encouraging us to share. So I have one for health sciences, I have one for sciences, there's one for agriculture. So we'll be taking this on the road over the coming academic year, so watch your research services newsletter and the library's website for announcements. The Portage Network resources, so they will be building out more things, some guides that they will be putting up on their website to go along with DMP Assistant. And there's some online training options. Neither of these are Canadian, so you do need to keep in mind that this is not in the Canadian context. The New England Collaborative Data Management Curriculum and the University of Edinburgh Research Data Mantra. They're pretty generic, but the one from the UK does refer to a lot of UK funders and some UK legislation. But those are great starting points to work from, and it gets you into the mindset of things. So those of you that have done research ethics proposals, you'll see that there is some overlap between the Dalhousie research ethics application and the DMP type questions, because we are asked about how we're going to treat sensitive data and so on. So you'll be able to use some of the same language in both items. And at this point, I think we'll open it up for questions. So folks online can type in their question into the chat box. We have somebody minding the computer, and she's going to wave at us when there is a question. Mr. Moosberger.
How important will it be to have an ORCID ID as part of this whole process?
So the question was, how important will it be to have an ORCID ID in this whole process? What I'm finding is that ORCID IDs are generally helpful in terms of citation and data citation. So I would suggest that they are a good thing to have. I don't think we have a mandate for every researcher to have them, but it would be useful. Anyone else? Silence. That either means I was completely confusing or completely clear. Okay. Well, if there are no further questions, then I guess we get to wrap it up. If you think of something later on or feeling shy about asking in front of an audience, you can use that email address, data.management@dal.ca, and that will come to me, and Erin and I will consult each other and respond to your question that way. Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks.